وسنقاوم احتلالا ثوريا إيرانيا للقرار السياسي اللبناني.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Future TV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's top stories. The Lebanese army arrests 4 suspects, including a pro-Asir preacher, in a massive manhunt for fugitives wanted in connection with twin suicide attacks on a military checkpoint. Palestinians accuse Israel of a dangerous escalation after the army killed 2 people in the West Bank, calling the violence a deliberate attempt to scupper peace talks. And a Cairo court acquits former presidential hopeful Ahmed Shafiq and the sons of a longtime President Hosni Mubarak on charges of corruption. The Lebanese army has arrested 4 suspects, including a pro-Asir preacher, in a massive manhunt for fugitives wanted in connection with twin suicide attacks on a military checkpoints. Security sources say troops raided houses belonging to fugitive Salafi labeled preacher Ahmed Lasir in Abra, arresting 2 suspects, a preacher identified as Sheikh Ala Saleh and Noor al-Sabagh. Sources say 2 Lebanese men identified by their family names Or and Suri were also apprehended in the search, which began early this morning in an area stretching from the valleys around Kosta, Sharhabil and the old town of Abra, east of Sidon, all the way to Kfar Fallous in the Jizin district of South Lebanon. Soldiers also raided the house of another pro-Asir preacher, Sheikh Osman Hnaini, but he was not found. Students at the Lebanese University in Zahle, east of Lebanon, gradually returned to their classes this afternoon following a bomb threat earlier at the higher education establishment. Security sources say the college ordered an evacuation at around 12 p.m. after an anonymous caller warned of a bomb planted at the facility. Head of the LU law faculty in Zahle, Wadad al-Sham'a, called the police, who dispatched experts to inspect the facility. Local security forces contacted the police headquarters in Beirut, demanding bomb-sniffing dogs. Finance Minister Mohammed Safadi gave his testimony in the corruption case that emerged following weather-related flooding and road closures earlier this month. The testimony, backed by documents, was made before financial prosecutor Ali Ibrahim. Aridi resigned on Monday after giving a testimony to Ibrahim in the flooding case. He blamed Safadi for the flooding, saying the finance minister refused to approve Public Works and Transportation Ministry funding to perform drainage maintenance in an attempt to pressure Aridi into endorsing illegal construction. Safadi denied such allegations, saying they are part of a political campaign against him. On another note, Ibrahim charged MEAS company with negligence and vandalism in the case of airport roads flows. Maronite Patriarch Bashar al-Ra'i posted his first tweets to thousands of Lebanese Christians, youth followers on the Bkirki account at Bkirki Jeune. In his tweet during a Wednesday evening event at Bkirki, Ra'i said, and I quote, "Dear young people, I see in you the hope of the church and its future, and we consider you as a regenerative force in the communities where you live." The event was attended by several Maronite bishops, Bkirki administrators, and youth church members. After sending out his tweet, Ra'i stressed the importance to stay in touch and communicate with the youth. And on the ground in Syria, warplanes have pounded northern Aleppo for a 5th consecutive day, unleashing their firepower against several rebel-held villages in the province. Activists also reported air raids on Darat Izza, Marha, Minbij, and Anadan, north of Aleppo. The villages targeted have been rebel-held for more than a year now and have suffered frequent bombing, but activists called today's raids an extension of a deadly 5-day aerial campaign against the provincial capital itself. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights added that the Aleppo district of Sheikh Najjar was hit with makeshift barrel bombs, which are packed with TNT and are highly destructive. Doctors Without Borders had reported more than 189 killing by Wednesday evening from such attacks in the city alone. The heads of the UN and European Union aid agencies have called for a humanitarian ceasefire in Syria to allow convoys to deliver help to areas that aid workers cannot reach. The officials urged all sides in the Syrian war to allow free access for humanitarian groups, saying aid should not be held hostage to political or military considerations. The UN leaders were in Brussels to sign contracts with the European Commission to provide 147 million euros in aid to people affected by the Syrian crisis.
We have just signed the largest ever contract for humanitarian aid between the Commission and our UN partners. I am proud that we can today commit 147 million euros to UNHCR, the World Food Programme and UNICEF. At the same time, we all know that a definitive solution for the conflict and for the dramatic humanitarian situation we are facing can only come from political negotiations.
I would just, first of all, like to express deep gratitude for what has been the European Commission's support, but the personal commitment of President Barroso and Commissioner Kristalina Georgieva in enhancing the support of the European Union to the Syrian people in these tragic moments. And I think that reveals not only generosity but wisdom. Because when one looks at the Syrian crisis, it's not only a humanitarian catastrophic situation, it is also a clear threat to global peace and security.
Coming up next, we'll tell you who is the lucky winner of the Man with Opera Hat, a $1 million work by Pablo Picasso. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Palestinians accuse Israel of a dangerous escalation after the army killed 2 people in the West Bank, calling the violence a deliberate attempt to scupper peace talks. Presidential spokesman Nabil Abu-Daina's remarks came after 2 Palestinians were killed in clashes sparked by separate arrest raids by the Israeli army in the northern West Bank. One of the victims, a member of the Palestinian security forces, was killed during an overnight arrest raid early this morning in the northern town of Kalkiya. Sources say another Palestinian was shot dead by the Israeli army, and several others were wounded in clashes that erupted after a similar arrest operation in Jenin refugee camp, also in the northern West Bank, yesterday evening. Moving on to Egypt, a Cairo court has acquitted former presidential hopeful Ahmed Shafiq and the sons of longtime President Hosni Mubarak on charges of corruption. Today's ruling clears one of the 2 remaining criminal cases against Shafiq, who left Egypt for the United Arab Emirates shortly after his failed presidential bid last summer. He was tried in absentia. The case was connected to the 1993 sale of some 40,000 square meters of land near the Suez Canal city of Ismailia. The land was owned at the time by an association of Air Force officers and used for fish farming. Shafiq, a longtime military pilot, allegedly used his position as president of the association to sell the land to the Mubaraks at below market prices. But defense lawyers insisted that the sale was made before Shafiq became the association's president. Anti-government fighters in South Sudan have claimed control over the flashpoint town of Bor as rival military factions paid no heed to the president's call for talks, raising fears of a slide into civil war. Battles between troops loyal to Riek Machar, South Sudan's fugitive former vice president, and the government's military continued early this morning. Violence, which first sparked in the capital of Juba on Sunday, has spread to the rural state of Jonglei in South Sudan and has killed about 500 people, according to the United Nations. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon urged South Sudan to deal with its ongoing national crisis through political dialogue.
This is a political crisis and urgently needs to be dealt with through political dialogue. There is a risk of this violence spreading to other states, as we have already seen some signs of this. It is essential to protect human rights of all those who are detained. Mandated human rights monitors must have full access to visit the detainees.
The situation is not clear, it's in flux, so the information we have received is infighting between soldiers of the South Sudanese army of the SPLA, fighting which apparently is largely on ethnic lines between Dinka, who are faithful to the president, and Noor, who are faithful to the former vice president.
And now for news around the world in brief. $1 million drawing by Pablo Picasso was snapped up by a 25-year-old American art lover at an online charity raffle for a mere €100. Jeffrey Gonano said he had been looking for a picture to hang on his living room wall, where he read an news article about the man with opera hat raffled by Sotheby's in Paris. All proceeds went to an association working to preserve the ancient city of Tyre, south of Lebanon. A man doused himself with gasoline and set himself on fire in St. Peter's Square in the Vatican City. Authorities say the 51-year-old man was treated at a nearby hospital and transferred to a larger one with serious burns to the upper part of his body. The Vatican said the man's motives were not known. The latest Mega Millions jackpot, driven to a near record of $648 million by last-minute sales, will be split between a Georgia woman who played numbers from family birth dates and an unknown winner in California. Ira Curry, 56, who bought her ticket at an Atlanta newsstand, claimed her prize at the state's lottery headquarters, choosing to receive her winnings in a lump sum cash payment of $173.8 million after taxes. Well, speaking of money, Britain will become the largest economy to adopt washing machine-resistant banknotes, which will also double a note's life expectancy in circulation. The Bank of England announces that plastic banknotes will be brought into circulation in 2016. The new notes will be made of polymer instead of cotton, like the current banknotes, because the bank says they will be much more cleaner and more durable. A public consultation giving people the chance to handle the notes found 80% of 13,000 individuals who responded were in favor of polymer. The £5 note, featuring former UK Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill, will be the first plastic banknote. The £10 note is to go plastic about a year later. This one will also have the image of author Jane Austen on it. The Bank of England says the new notes will retain their familiar look, including the portrait of the Queen and a historical character.
Well, we think it is significant. They bring a lot of benefits. They're more secure, so they protect us against counterfeiting much better than the existing notes, better technology. Secondly, they're cleaner. They don't suffer from the deterioration we've seen with the paper-based notes. And they're more durable. They'll last 2.5 years as long. That means, or 2.5 times, I should say, as long as the existing notes. That means they're cheaper for the taxpayer, and they're also more environmentally friendly. So all of that it's pretty significant. And I should say this is the culmination of a 3-year process that we've undertaken. Well, we have 3 big responsibilities: price stability, as you say, inflation, financial stability, and confidence in the money. And I'm a firm believer. We're firm believers that if we have to maintain standards in all of those areas, because they're self-reinforcing. We want people to have confidence in the system. If they don't have confidence in the most tangible form of money, in other words, banknotes, if they look tatty, or if they're worried about counterfeiting, that doesn't serve the British public well, and that can, on the edges, undermine confidence in price stability and financial stability. So we have to get this right. That's why this is significant.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now, let me remind you of our headlines. The Lebanese army arrests 4 suspects, including a pro-Assir preacher, in a massive manhunt for fugitives wanted in connection with twin suicide attacks on a military checkpoint. Palestinians accuse Israel of a dangerous escalation after the army killed 2 people in the West Bank, calling the violence a deliberate attempt to scupper peace talks. And a Cairo court acquits former presidential hopeful Ahmed Shafiq and the sons of longtime President Hosni Mubarak on charges of corruption. Those are today's headlines from us here at Future Television. I'm Lena Tamim, wishing you all a very nice evening.
وسنقاوم احتلالا ثوريا إيرانيا للقرار السياسي اللبناني.